ways to actually measure it. And there are many out there that are living on pledges. And as we move to this new era pivot from the words, whether it is negotiations, whether it is pledges, but to real action and implementation, the need for this credible accounting system is so crucial. The net zero data public utility will help us with this, and it will achieve this through providing financial institutions the information they need from the companies that they finance to ensure transparency down the line. It also provides a level of accountability and disclosure that makes this an effective tool for policymakers and investors. And as Mike said, this pushes companies to doing more, moving further forward, faster. But it also creates the environment that's required for the much needed investment in terms of the rapid transformation that is required. And finally, with respect to civil society, more transparency and openness solidifies the belief that our climate goals are achievable and that we have evidence, we're able to demonstrate the evidence of that progress. So looking forward, the UNFCCC is committed to working collaboratively with you on this utility, and this ensures that the outputs of this work are fully integrated in our global climate action portal. This is an exciting step forward. There is a significant amount of work that still needs to be done, but this has started. So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe I'm handing over to the Minister. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. Dear Michael, dear Simon, thank you for your invaluable partnership in implementing the One Planet Data Hub initiative. This is a project that is very, very dear to President Emmanuel Macron, who launched it last year at COP26. Unfortunately, for national reason, he could not be with us, but I'm very honored to represent him. This One Planet Data Hub initiative is about creating an open access platform for climate data. It will gather data on the climate commitments of companies and financial institutions, and will allow us to scrutinize the concrete implementation of these climate commitments. It is crucial because, as we keep repeating, this scope marks the time for concrete implementation. Today, most financial institutions and big companies have committed to carbon neutrality by 2050. These are the promises. But yet, scientists keep telling us that they were still not on track to achieve our climate goals. I could not stress this strongly enough. The risk of corporate greenwashing on net zero commitment is a threat to climate action. How do you expect our citizens to do their part of the collective climate effort if big polluting companies don't do their own? UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has rightly identified this risk when he set up an anti-greenwashing task force earlier this year. The net zero public data utility will be an effective tool to fight this risk of greenwashing. It will monitor the progress made by each company and each financial institution to achieve its climate targets. It will allow everyone to be informed about which companies really act on climate and which companies do not. And by doing so, it will shed light on the potential gap between companies' climate pledges and their action. But it will also valorize, finally, the companies that sincerely committed to green their business. This initiative, my dear friends, it is a huge step forward for transparency and accountability, as you said, Michael, on climate action. Transparency and accountability, that is precisely what our citizens, and especially our youth, are asking us for day after day on climate action. Indeed, transparency can be a very powerful engine for action, because today we need this financial system to redirect private capital towards green finance. In the European Union alone, 480 billion euros of additional investment will be necessary each year for us to meet our objective. And data will be a precious tool for regulators and the markets to drive this transition. Because climate data is so important for the ecological transition, my country, France, and Europe have already implemented strong measures on this front. At the European level, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, adopted last June under the French presidency of the European Council, is a game changer. It will provide a huge amount of high-quality, standardized and verified climate data on more than 50,000 European companies. With the Net Zero Public Data Utility Initiative, we go a step forward. We now cover all corporates around the world. Climate data has been hidden behind paywalls for too long, and a huge cost for the planet. Today, with this precious initiative, everyone will have finally access to this global public good. But we're still at the beginning of our journey. A pilot version of the database should be operational by COP28 next year. And after that, more and more data should be added to the platform. In parallel, selected actors such as the OECD and the regulators will have access to this data. There is still a long way to go for our world to achieve the goal of the Paris Agreement. Each of us, but each of us must do its part. Governments, private firms, financial institutions, philanthropies, and this is exactly what you do, dear Michael. Initiatives like this one are reasons to be hopeful. So you can count, all of you, on the full mobilization of my country, and especially on President Macron's personal commitment and mobilization. I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to thank you, Michael and Simon, very much.
Thank you so much. That was Chrysula Zacharopoulou, French Secretary of State for International Partnerships. Now, before we get to the stellar panel, I'd also like to call on stage for very brief remarks Professor Lee White, Gabon's Minister of Water, Forests, Sea and Environment.
Thank you so much. Very brief. I have a reputation for talking too much, so I will be very brief. As the newest member of the committee, it's a great pleasure to be here today. As the host of the One Forest Summit co-host of the One Forest Summit in Libreville in March next year. It's great to be here on the One Planet Data Initiative. I'm Gabon's Minister of Water, Forests, the Seas, the Environment. I'm a scientist by training, so I like data. I think data is critical to understanding the problem we're in. Having clear, transparent, quality data is extremely important. Listening in the different rooms as a minister from the Congo Basin, I'm hearing all sorts of statistics about Congo Basin. Congo Basin's absorbing 30 billion tons of CO2 every year. But all these statistics are things that are physically impossible. There's all sorts of data flowing around, and much of it is questionable. Yesterday, my President Ali Bongo Ndimba, in his speech, he referred to the fact that Gabon is probably the most carbon-positive country on Earth. Did he get a round of applause? No, he didn't. People looked a bit confused. Yeah? Is Gabon really the most carbon-positive country on Earth? Is that possible? Little Gabon on the west coast of Africa. Maybe Guyana or Suriname or Papua New Guinea or Congo might rival Gabon. The truth is there's no easy kind of one-stop shop of quality vetted data where people can go and look at what are different countries' emissions. You can Google it and numbers will pop up, but as you scroll down through your Google hits, you're going to see different statistics for every country, different statistics for every company, different statistics for every city. And so bringing all that data together in a platform where we can have confidence that the data has been vetted and is as good quality as possible. Perhaps you may know Global Forest Watch, which tries to do it for the forest, which is pretty good, but it's not perfect. A Global Forest Watch for the world. I think to move this process forward, we need that transparency, we need the quality of data, and if this initiative can bring that to the world, it is going to be extremely influential. So thank you, everybody, and let's push this important initiative forwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Now, I would love, thank you. You're absolutely right. Let's push it forward. Let's now get the stellar panel actually on stage. Mary Shapiro, SDSC Chair, Shamara Wickramakye, Chief Executive Officer of Macquarie Group, Henry Fernandez, Chief Executive Officer of MSCI, Ravi Menon, Monetary Authority of Singapore, Nicolette Barlett, Chief Impact Officer, CDP, and Emmanuel Faber, ISSSB Chair. So thank you all for joining us. Mary, let's start with you. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you're announcing today and the key recommendations of the CDSC and what the next steps are?
Happy to. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Francine. So we're doing two important things today. We're announcing the publication of our white paper, which contains recommendations for the development of the net zero data public utility. And then we're going to announce an RFP. But the white paper first. It really outlines how the utility should address the data gaps and inconsistencies and inaccessibilities that slow climate action. We know that data is important for companies, for financial institutions to do their transition planning, but also for regulators and supervisors and civil society to hold everyone accountable to the commitments that they've made. So this release really stems from a shared understanding of the members of the Climate Data Steering Committee about what the inadequacies are in the current system and how to provide access to really high quality climate transition data. There are three core recommendations. The first is that The data utility will include company and financial institution level data for direct emissions, scope 1 and 2, and for scope 3 emissions indirect. We also recommend that the utility feature transparently reported corporate emission reduction targets that detail how companies' specific actions will enable them to reach net zero, including
for the statement during the high-level segment. A statement should be as concise as possible, noting that full text of the official statement will be made available in the UNIFES CCC websites. And finally, please note the head of the state of government who are not in the plenary at the time for delivery and their statements will be scheduled to speak in the end of all statements of the same category. Dear distinguished heads of the state of government, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, let us begin. It's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Gaston Brown, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, speaking on behalf of the Alliance of Small Island States. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellency. Mr. President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Alliance of Small Island States. The group thanks the government of the Arab Republic of Egypt for hosting COP27. 30 years ago, parties agreed to stabilize greenhouse gas emissions at a level that would prevent dangerous interference with the climate system. 30 years ago, EOSIS proposed a financing mechanism for loss and damage associated with sea level rise. Today, emissions have already passed dangerous levels, and yet there is still no operational financing mechanism for loss and damage. Today, for small island states such as mine, the soliloquy in William Shakespeare's Macbeth resonates with a hammering significance. And I quote, "Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death," end of quote. Tomorrow is pledged every year for the 27 years of these COP meetings. An entire generation has been born and grown to adulthood. And yet, tomorrow has not come. Governments and corporations come to the COP each year, delivering grand statements with lofty commitments. But these commitments are only partially honored. While SIDS economies have been decimated, the oil and gas industry continues to earn almost $3 billion United States dollars daily in profits. In the last 50 years, their profits averaged $1 trillion per year and is expected to double in 2022. In the first half of this year, 6 fossil fuel companies, and I emphasize 6, made more than enough money to cover the costs of major climate damages in developing countries, with nearly $70 billion in profits. It is about time that these companies are made to pay a global carbon tax on their profits as a source of funding for loss and damage. Profligate producers of fossil fuels have benefited from extortionate profits at the expense of human civilization. While they are profiting, the planet is burning. If this continues unabated, our entire human civilization will be imperiled. The time has come for us to move from advocacy to action. Action that is fully implementable, and certainly to ensure the full implementation of the climate agenda to save our planet from near total destruction. We need urgent collective action to reduce emissions and to end fossil fuel subsidies. the proceeds of which should be redirected and used to fund adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage, especially in small island developing states. Financing to address loss and damage, and a recommitment to keeping 1.5 alive in the face of the current energy crisis are the key critical success factors of COP27. Loss and damage should not be seen through divisive and controversial lens, but as a form of climate justice for climate change's hapless victims and a decarbonization accelerator. We unequivocally must establish a loss and damage response fund here at this COP. The adoption of the agenda item is just one step, and we look forward to the establishment and operationalization of the fund by 2024. After 30 years, SIDS should be demanding more. Establishing a new multilateral loss and damage fund is a small token when our members are losing up to 200% of GDP in one day from a single climate event. We recognize that in a world where might conquers right and power triumphs over fairness, the advocacy of small island states can be easily brushed aside and ignored. Determined to achieve urgent, just, and sustained climate action, a group of AOSIS member states, including Antigua and Barbuda, Tuvalu, Palau, and Niue, have registered with the UN Secretariat a Commission of Small Island States on Climate Change and International Law, COSIS. COSIS will explore the responsibility of states for injuries arising from their climate actions and breaches in their obligations. As small countries, this is the new dynamic pathway of justice where the polluter pays that we bring to the process of climate diplomacy. Ireland, Denmark, and Belgium have begun to show the way by announcing support to developing countries that have suffered damage due to climate change. It would be right for the major polluters, particularly those that have been involved in the historical use of fossil fuel energies, to follow this example. Mr. Chairman, the world now faces more floods, droughts, storms, and wildfires requiring an urgent response. Therefore, not only in the interests of small states, but the interests of the global community, we will fight unrelentingly this climate crisis. And this includes fighting in international courts and under international law. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Macky Sall, President of Senegal. So, Excellency, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, chers collègues, Monsieur le Secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Monsieur le Président de la 27e conférence des États parties, de la conférence de la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques, Mesdames et Messieurs, au nom de l'Afrique, encore une fois, je voudrais remercier l'Égypte pour l'accueil de cette COP qui remet au cœur de l'agenda mondial la question vitale du changement climatique. L'année dernière, nous avons adopté le pacte de Glasgow sur le climat, un compromis après plusieurs années de négociations ardues qui prévoit les mesures à prendre pour renforcer la protection du climat, conformément à l'accord de Paris sur le climat. L'Afrique renouvelle ici son engagement au titre de l'accord de Paris et son attachement à la prise en compte de ses besoins spécifiques. Nous voulons une transition énergétique juste et équitable dans le cadre des mécanismes négociés comme les partenariats pour une transition juste, en lieu et place de décisions unilatérales qui pourraient gravement entraver l'atteinte de nos objectifs de développement, en particulier l'accès universel à l'électricité dont 600 millions d'Africains restent encore privés. Alors nous devons bien nous entendre. Nous sommes pour le climat, nous sommes pour la réduction des gaz à effet de serre, mais l'Afrique ne saurait accepter qu'on porte atteinte à ses intérêts vitaux sur la question de la transition énergétique. Bien que faiblement émetteurs, nos pays restent les plus vulnérables aux pertes et dommages liés au changement climatique. Stress hydrique, érosion côtière, perte de biodiversité, cycle alternatif de sécheresse et d'inondation et baisse de la productivité agricole, entre autres. Pour autant, nos pays assument leur part dans la lutte contre le réchauffement climatique, notamment par la mise en œuvre de stratégies de mix énergétique pour un développement sobre en carbone et résilient au changement climatique. C'est pourquoi il importe que la COP27 prenne une décision ambitieuse sur le financement de ce volet essentiel des négociations. Je rappelle que les estimations du GIEC montrent que l'Afrique à elle seule a besoin de 86 milliards de dollars par an d'ici 2030 pour financer ses besoins d'adaptation. C'est dire que l'objectif de 100 milliards de dollars par an promis pour soutenir l'action climatique des pays en développement est un engagement à minima. Et je dois réitérer ici nos remerciements aux pays européens et de la Fondation Gates pour leur soutien sur le programme d'accélération pour l'adaptation en Afrique. Nous invitons les autres pays et institutions partenaires à appuyer nos efforts dans ce sens. Je rappelle que pour l'essentiel en matière d'adaptation, ce sont les pays en développement qui financent pour l'essentiel leurs projets vers notamment les infrastructures en recourant à la dette, alors que les efforts d'adaptation devraient plutôt être pris en charge par les engagements financiers convenus. Financer par nos propres moyens nos efforts d'adaptation à une situation dont nos pays sont plutôt victimes est assurément une double peine que nous ne sommes pas disposés à subir. Face donc à l'urgence climatique, les priorités de l'Afrique portent également sur le développement d'une agriculture résiliente, adaptée aux écosystèmes des pays. Ainsi, avec ses réserves foncières et hydriques mises en valeur par des ressources financières et technologiques adaptées, l'Afrique peut se nourrir par elle-même et aider à nourrir le monde qui sera de plus en plus exposé au risque de pénurie alimentaire. C'est dans cet esprit que le Sénégal, en collaboration avec le groupe de la Banque africaine de développement, accueillera la deuxième conférence Feed Africa de Dakar du 25 au 27 janvier prochain. Et je voudrais vous y convier et vous remercier tous de votre attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Alar Karis, President of Estonia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the fact that the tipping points and planetary boundaries are nearer than we previously thought means only one thing. We shall not delay or dilute the Glasgow and Paris agreements. The Glasgow Climate Pact is truly ambitious for its critical decade, although we need to go even further and close the book on phasing down unabated coal. COP27, under the Egyptian leadership, hopes to take a step forward on adoption and implementation. The Glasgow Pact provides a good framework for this too. After all, to save human lives, both adaptation and mitigation are required. The present fossil fuel energy crisis only speeds up a decisive push towards climate neutrality through renewable energy. Russian war in Ukraine has inflicted horrible human suffering in Europe and endangered energy and food security globally. In spite of short-term adjustment, the EU remains committed to ambitious 2030 goals. The era of fossil fuels will give way to the new era of sustainability, circular economy and clean solutions for a simple reason that the solution will save the most money and make greatest improvement to our lives' quality. For us in Estonia, this transition makes perfect sense. Having been totally dependent on our local fossil fuels, we are now on track to produce 100% of our electricity from renewables by 2030. But this is not all. We learned during our previous great societal transformation, the building of our digital society, that being smart can multiply the positive impacts of transformation. So let us do things we need to do, such as phase out fossil fuels and also be smart. Let us make sustainability a core principle of education. Let us design regulations that drive green innovation. Let us build digital societies and use smart technologies in a way that support net zero efforts, tackling also digital waste. Our clean tech startup scene has some success stories to share, such as software making forestry and agriculture more sustainable, or smart solution to improve energy efficiency. Also, let us be smart with our investments. Climate change knows no borders, and neither should our response. Often the biggest benefits for ourselves and the planet may come from the investments outside the national borders. For example, supporting the climate mitigation efforts in the Global South, the Arctic, and other areas that are burning, literally or metaphorically. It is time not to think only locally and regionally, but also globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Andrzej Duda, President of Poland. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished presidents of COP26 and COP27, presidents, prime ministers, ladies and gentlemen, I congratulate Egypt on hosting the 27th session of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. I also thank the United Kingdom for its chairmanship of COP26. The 30th anniversary of the adoption of the Convention, which falls this year, prompts us to take stock of the climate action undertaken so far and to discuss the next steps, especially in the face of a very difficult international situation, the war in Ukraine, food and climate crisis. What has Poland done throughout these past years? It has achieved the adopted gas emissions reduction targets by 2020. It is actively developing the system of renewable energy sources, as well as the low-carbon civil nuclear power program. Poland is promoting electromobility, energy efficiency, and is developing new technologies. Our country is actively engaged in order to meet the goals set for us all. Despite challenges arising from the nature of our energy sector and industry, Poland is an example of a country following the path of sustainable development, significantly reducing emissions while growing its GDP. Ladies and gentlemen, in Poland and in the European Union, we are on the path to achieving the goals stipulated in the Climate Convention and in the Paris Agreement. For this to succeed, we all need to step up our efforts and act responsibly for the sake of socially sustainable transition. Let us remember, transition is there to serve man, not man to serve transition. As I said yesterday during our discussion of just transition, and now I'm saying this is on behalf of millions of my compatriots who are not going to ask us during the upcoming winter how many of our ambitious climate goals we have achieved. What they are going to ask is why the energy resources are so expensive and why their living standards have dropped so dramatically. Transition that puts man at the center of changes has to be cost-effective and serve energy security. By adopting the Katowice rulebook, as well as the Solidarity and Just Transition Declaration at COP24 in Poland, we have defined a framework for these actions. Today we must implement it in a consistent manner. While doing so, let us not be climate hypocrites, since it's easy for the leaders of the rich North to boast with their achievements. The world, however, has the right to ask where we have moved our production. For if we have moved it into non-European countries, then we should not forget that our responsibility has not disappeared. Since we are the ones who say that there is just one climate. Ladies and gentlemen, let me make one more point. Today, our transformation is much more difficult, among other things, due to Russia's criminal aggression against Ukraine, which has inflicted enormous human losses, caused damage to Ukraine's infrastructure, economy, and environment, losses for which the Russian perpetrators should be held accountable and which they should cover. The consequence of Russia's aggression are crisis and huge costs which put at risk timely implementation of climate transition as well as timely attainment of the intended goals. It has also generated additional emissions, exceeding the level of those produced by a number of developing countries within the scope of 1 year. In the light of the above, we must provide a strong response, caring first and foremost for the people, for our compatriots, for individual energy consumers. Moreover, we must strive to ensure that the Russian aggression is promptly and permanently repealed by increasing support for Ukraine, enhancing pressure on Russia, and stepping up our efforts to become independent of Russian fossil fuels. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, today we need solidarity and concerted global action as much as ever. We need to work out innovative solutions that will ensure energy security and climate protection. Ones which, through research and development, will bring about a technological leap towards a low-carbon transition. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. I would like to remember that there is a 3-minute time for the statement during the high-level summit. It's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Emerson Dambutso Mangwana, President of Zimbabwe. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, His Excellency Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, we meet at a time when the impact of climate change continues destroying people's lives and livelihoods in every part of the world. It is opportune that this COP27 is being held on the African continent. Our voice must be heard, as too should our demands and expectations. We must unite as a continent and speak with one voice. There is need for concrete actions. Those mostly responsible for the climate crisis must listen and prioritize climate finance to help prevent disasters and climate victims recover. Commitments we have made and continue to make can only make a difference when we act on them. Mr. President, the agricultural sector, which is key to Zimbabwe's economy, is facing a serious threat from climate change. My government is implementing various programs, including extensive dam construction projects towards climate change adaptation and mitigation for sustainable food and nutrition security. Further, Zimbabwe is expanding the production and the use of renewable energy. Zimbabwe will see greenhouse gas emissions curbed to 44.7 million tons of carbon dioxide by 2030. My country has also integrated gender issues in the revised nationally determined contributions. Greater progress would be made on our climate goals were it not for the albatross of illegal economic sanctions imposed on our country. We demand the immediate lifting of these unwarranted and punitive sanctions. Zimbabwe is committed to be a friend to all and an enemy to none. And we are ready to play our part in addressing climate change and other challenges that face our world. In conclusion, Your Excellency, at this COP27, let us from the developing world act as a countermanding bloc of victims of climate change. We need to negotiate and vote as a bloc through the group of 77 plus China. Only then are we likely to carry the day. We can and must act now to secure a healthy planet for the present and the future generations. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Mokgweetsi Eric Masisi, President of Botswana. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, COP President, heads of state and government, distinguished delegates. Coming from the opposite southern slopes of Africa of similar climate to Egypt-induced limitations, our summer has barely begun and temperatures can easily climb to 40 degrees Celsius on a given day. The new normal of unpredictable patterns of rainfall is compounding unreliability of rain-fed agriculture. What used to be the Molopo River no longer loops the length of the Kalahari. The migratory flamingo no longer flock to the Makadikadi pans for the seasonal breeding in greater numbers. We've witnessed with increasing helplessness as the floodplain of the Chobe and the reach of the Okavango Delta were forced into a retreat, threatening livelihoods and calamity to the entire ecosystem meant to support the largest concentration of elephants in the wild on Earth. There is no doubt that we all acknowledge the science and warnings on climate change, but implementation of desired adaptation actions and deliverables, though a national development imperative for many of us, has thus far remained elusive and, yes, a mirage. At the recent 2022 National Adaptation Plans Expo we hosted in Gaborone, it became evident from the exchanges that the need to implement adaptation actions is increasingly becoming more urgent, not only for Botswana, but also for the rest of the vulnerable countries around the globe. Botswana has in place the climate change policy and its associated strategy and action plan. Adaptation measures within the agricultural sector includes the development of a drought-resistant crop varieties and livestock breeds more tolerable to the harsh climatic conditions. However, smart agricultural approaches and the deployment of associated technologies, including the integrated water master plan that transfers water from the north to the southern parts of the country for both drinking and for food production, come at a prohibitive cost. However, our commitment to the international community remains undiminished. Within the limitation of our financial resources, Botswana intends to do more, especially through our research institutions, to provide the necessary support, given our capability and experience in the development of animal disease vaccines and disease management through the Botswana Vaccine Institute. With additional support to our research institutions, we can provide the world with some of the cutting-edge adaptation solutions, especially on agriculture and health. Drought is another permanent feature in Botswana, which continues to deplete the little resources we have for socio-economic development. This has prompted the government to develop a drought management strategy to assist in resilience building to mitigate loss and damage, as well as mobilize resources. This will, however, not be enough without innovative adaptation funding systems. I wish to urge the UNFCCC to rethink adaptation financing. For effective implementation of adaptation actions, the project-based approach will not yield the intended results. Adaptation financing, due to its long-term nature, should be embedded into the national treasury, as it requires established institutions and systems which are not project-based. We need to rethink our adaptation financing strategy. We need to consider joining the Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund to create an adaptation window that can accommodate integrated, innovative approaches to financing adaptation actions as opposed to project-based financing. On mitigation, the government of Botswana has made a decision to increase renewable energy penetration from 2% to 30% by 2030. This will double the national determinant contributions targets. These efforts are in line with the energy policy and renewable energy strategy. Additional resources are pivotal to the full implementation of our integrated resource plan and on an accelerated basis. In conclusion, I wish to pledge my delegation's support to the COP presidency as you steer the debates in the direction that should deliver timely results in implementation, especially on climate finance for adaptation and mitigation measures, technology development and research. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Kruhelsup Upna, Presidente of Mongolia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Эрхэм хүндэт Арабын бүгд найрамдах Египт улсын ерөнхийлөгч Абдел Фаттах эл-Сиси, эрхэм хүндэт Нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын ерөнхий нэрийн бичгийн дарга Антони Гутерриш, эрхэм хүндэт зочид төлөөлөгчдөө, хатагтай ноёдоо, уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтийн тухай Нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын Суур конвенцийн талуудын 27 дугаар баг хурлыг амжилттай зохион байгуулж байгаа Арабын бүгд найрамдах Египт улсын засгийн газарт гүн талархал илэрхийлж, дээд түвшний уулзалт болон багруулгын үйл ажиллагаанд өндөр амжилт хүсэж байна. Энэ удаагийн талуудын баг хурал нь уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтөд хүчтэй өртөж буй Африк төв зохион байгуулагдж байгаараа бас онцлог юм а. Дэлхийн нийтийг хамарсан хүнс, эрчим хүчний хомсдол, үнийн өсөлт, геополитикийн хорцнууд байдал зэрэг хүндрэл бэрхшээлтэй асуудал олон байгаа хэдий ч дэлхийн улс орнууд тогтвортой хөгжлийн зорилттой хангах, хэрэгжүүлэх, түүн дотор уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтийн эсрэг тэмцэх хүчин чармаалтаа хэрхэвч сулуулж болохгүй бөгөөд харин ч улам идэвхтэй ажиллах явдал чухал байна. Хөрс, хүнс, хүн гурав хүн холбоотой. Хөрс эрүүл бол хүнс эрүүл. Хүнс эрүүл бол хүн эрүүл байна. Тийм учраас уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтийн эсрэг тэмцэх үйл хэрэг бол хөрсөө хамгаалах, хүнээ хамгаалах, хүнсээ хамгаалах хүн төрлөختний суур асуудал мөн юм а. Нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын 2021 оны судалгаагаар дэлхийн хүн амын 30 орчим хувь буюу 2.3 тэрбум хүн хүнсний аюулгүй байдлын эрсдэлд ороод байгаа бөгөөд 828 сая хүн өлсгөлөнд нэрвэгдээд байна гэсэн судалгаа гарсан байна. Ийм учраас улс орон бүр хүнсний хангамж, аюулгүй байдлын асуудал, уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтийн асуудлыг тогтвортой хөгжлийн зорилтын хүрээнд цогцоор авч үзэх зайлшгүй шаардлагатай гэж үзэж байна. Монгол улс тогтвортой хөгжлийн зорилтуудыг хангах үүднээс хүнсний хангамж, аюулгүй байдал, эрүүл Монгол хүн, тэрүүн мод үндэсний хөдөлгөөнийг эх орондоо санаачлан зохион байгуулж байна. Тухайлбал тэрүүн мод үндэсний хөдөлгөөнийг амжилттай хэрэгжүүлснээр Монгол орны ойн сан нэмэгдэж, хөлөмжийн шингэлтийг нэмэгдүүлэх боломж бүрдгээс гадна хөрөс хамгаалал, хөдөө аж ахуйн үйлдвэрлэл, хүнсний хангамж, аюулгүй байдал сайжрах, ажлын байр нэмэгдэх зэрэг нийгэм эдийн засгийн олон асуудлуудыг шийдвэрлэхэд эергээр нөлөөлнө гэж үзэж байгаамаа. Тус хөдөлгөөнд нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын ерөнхий нарийн бичгийн дарга Антонио Гутерриш өөрийн биеэр нэгдэн манай эх оронд хүрэлцэн ирж дэмжин оролцсныг энд тэмдэглэн хэлэхэд сайхан байна. Мөн тэрүүн мод үндэсний хөдөлгөөнийг дэмжин бидэнтэй хамт ажиллаж байгаа дэлхийн улс орнууд, хөгжлийн түншүүд, олон улсын байгууллагуудад гүн талбарт илэрхийлэхийн зэрэгцээ Монгол улс Европын холбооны ойн түншлэл хөтөлбөрийн хүрээнд хамтран ажиллах Аз твийн анхны улс болж байгааг бас дуулахад сайхан байна. Монгол улс уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлт хүчтэй нэрвдэж байгаа улс орнуудын нэг бөгөөд манай орны ядгаруулж буй хөлөмжийн хийн хэмжээ дэлхийн нийтийн хөлөмжийн хийн ядгуурлын ердөө 0.1% эзэлдэг хэдий ч нэг хүнд болон нэгж дотоодын бүтээгдэхүүнд оногдох хэмжээгээр дэлхийн дундчтай харьцуулахад өндөр тооцогдож байна. Тийм учраас Монгол улс уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтийн эсрэг дэлхийн нийтийн хүчин чармаалтыг тууштай дэмжиж өөрийн зохих хувь нэмрээ оруулсаар ирсэн. Энэ хүрээнд манай улс хөлөмжийн ядгуурлыг бууруулах үндэсний зорилтоо 27.2% хүргэн ахиулан тодорхойлсон манай орны хувьд өндөр үзүүлэлт юм а. Монгол улсын хөлөмжийн хийн ядгарлын дийлэнх нь эрчим хүч, хөдөө аж ахуй энэ салбарт оногдож байна. Манай улс газар зүйн байршил, цаг уурын нөхцөлийн хувьд 2600 гигаваттаар хэмжигдэхүйц сэргээгдэх эрчим хүчний асар их нөөцтэй ороо. Энэ нь Монгол улс сэргээгдэх эрчим хүчний үйлдвэрлэлийг нэмэгдүүлэх, цаашлаад бүс нутгийн эрчим хүчний хангамжид хувь нэмэр оруулах боломжтойг бас харуулж байгаамаа. Одоогийн байдлаар Монгол улсын эрчим хүчний нийт суурлагдсан хүчин чадлын 18.2%-ийг сэргээгдэх эрчим хүчээр хангагдж байгаа бөгөөд 2030 он гэхэд энэ үзүүлэлтийг бид 30% хүрэхээр зорж байна. Өдгөө манай Монгол улсын малчин өрхийн 75% нь сэргээгдэх эрчим хүчийг ашиглаж байна. Дотоодын сэргээгдэх эрчим хүчний их үүсвэрийг нэмэгдүүлэх зорилгоор бүс нутгийн улс орнууд олон улсын байгууллагатай идэвхтэй хамтран ажиллаж байна. Монгол улс. Түүнчлэн Монгол улс хөлөмжийн ялгарлыг бууруулахад метан хийн ялгаралд онцгой анхаарч дайны дэлхийн метаны амлалтад саяхан нэгдэн орсон. Мөн хөлөмжийн хийн ялгарлыг бууруулах, шингээлтийг нэмэгдүүлэх, уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтөд дасан зохицох чадвараа бэхжүүлснээр хөлөмжийн хийн ялгарл болон шингээлтийн зөрүүг ойртуулж 2050 он гэхэд тэглэх зорилт тавин ажиллаж байна. Уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлт, хүний үйл ажиллагааны сөрөг нөлөөтэй хавсран биологийн олон янз байдлын хомсдол, газрын дөрөөтөл, цөлжилтийн явцыг түргэгдэж байна. Иймд Монгол улс нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын цөлжилтөд тэмцэх конвенцийн талуудын 17 дугаар баг хурлыг өөрийн эх орон Улаанбаатар хотод 2026 онд зохион байгуулахаар бэлтгэл ажлыг хангаж байгааг бас та бүхэнд дуулгая. Нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын суур конвенцууд буюу Иракийн 3 конвенцийн 2 болон олон талт хамтын ажиллагаануудын механизмууд тухайлбал Парисын хэлцээрийн 6 дугаар зүйл заасан дэлхийн нүүрс төрөгчийн зах зээлийг улс орнууд оновчтой ашиглах явдал зүйтэй юм а. Ингэснээр хөгжиж буй улс орнуудад техник, технологи, инновац нэвтрүүлэх, ногоон санхүүжилтээ нэмэгдүүлэх боломж бүрдэх бөгөөд үр дүн нь хөгжиж буй улс орнуудад тулгарч буй бэрхшээл зорилттой амжилтаа даван туулж, дэвшүүлсэн зорилтоо ханган хэрэгжүүлэхэд чухал алхам болно гэж үзэж байна. Иймээс Монгол улс дэлхийн улс орнууд, олон улсын байгууллагууд, донор орнууд болон хөгжлийн түншүү та бүхэнтэй бүх талаар нээлттэй харилцан ашигтай үр дүнтэй хамтран ажиллах хүсэл тэмүүлэлтэй байгаагаа энэхүү өндөр дээрээс дахин илэрхийлье. Эцэст нь хэлэхэд та бидний харилцан ойлголцол, хамтын ажиллагаа, зоримог шийдвэрүүд, тууштай хичээл зүтгэл, уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтийн эсрэг тавьсан зорилтоо цаг хугацаанд нь амжилттай ханган хэрэгжүүлж, цаашлаад тогтвортой хөгжлийг зогсооход онцгой чухал ажил багталтай юм а. Их дэлхий бидний гэр орон, их байгал бидний оршихуйн үндэс гэдгийг үргэлж санаж, ирээдүйн хойч үеийнхээ сайн сайхны төлөө нэгэн зорилго, нэгдмэл хүсэл тэмүүлэлээр хамтран зүтгэцгээе. Анхаарал хандуулсанд баярлалаа. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, President of Sri Lanka. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
The Chairperson, Excellencies, Delegates, the salubrious environment of the green city of Sharm el-Sheikh will undoubtedly inspire our discussions at COP27 to a successful conclusion. I sincerely thank the Government of Egypt for your warm welcome and hospitality. Mr. Chairman, in order to make my speech brief, I will eliminate the achievements of Sri Lanka in regard to climate change, which will certainly be included in the written speeches. There's only one issue that I refer to in Sri Lanka. Yet for climate action to be successful, wide-ranging measures to complement the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement must be pursued. The lack of capacity is the biggest obstacle to the implementation of climate action plans. Therefore, capacity building is vital in this regard. To overcome this obstacle, we propose to establish an international climate change university in Sri Lanka with an ancillary institute in Maldives that will be the first of its type. This seat of learning can be a transdisciplinary global center for green and blue studies, for scientists, environmentalists, researchers, policymakers, development practitioners, and of course, students the world over to interchange knowledge, transcending national and disciplinary boundaries. The envisaged Climate Change University will offer both short-term courses and postgraduate academic awards to build capabilities on the mitigating and adapting to climate change. The university will also expedite the skills of the new generations to deliver the political, economic, social, cultural, and digital transformation required to prevent a 1.5 centigrade world. It would be the vehicle to enlighten climate change challenges and prospects domestically. The collaboration of multilateral institutions and organizations such as the Commonwealth, World Bank, and the ADB, amongst others, will be sought for the establishment of the Institute of Higher Learning, making it a multi-stakeholder partnership transcending national boundaries. It's my hope that Sri Lanka's proposal will receive extensive support and endorsement from the international community. Since the prescription for addressing climate change have to be dispensed in the global domain, we will meet again next year, charged with high hopes. However, the checkered implementation of previous decisions, including those of COP26, is extremely disheartening. Regrettably, The ground reality is that the fossil fuel-based industrialized countries of G7 and G20, who have been the main promoters of green hydrogen, are now backtracking to use fossil fuel. In the last year, carbon dioxide emissions increased by 2 billion metric tons, from 3.3 billion to 36.3 billion metric tons. Such double standards are unacceptable. Developed nations should be giving leadership to overcome climate challenges rather than abdicating their responsibilities. It is no secret that climate financing has missed the target. It's ironic that the $100 billion pledged annually have not been available in the coffers to finance climate challenges, as many developed nations deem it fit to renege on their climate financing contributions. These countries, who are also on both sides of the Ukraine war, seem to have no qualms spending for a war which will finally exceed $350 billion, a conflict waged purportedly for security interests of the combatants. The only security at stake is food insecurity, exacerbated to levels not experienced before the war. Many living both in the developed and the developing world are outside the scope of three meals a day. It is estimated that between 30 to 40 million people are being driven into hunger, especially in Africa. This war has also resulted in the upward spiraling cost of living, shortages of oil and gas supplies, and it has brought the fight against hunger to our homes. Expectedly, it has led to the curtailing of much required climate financing pledged by these very same countries. The issue we have is not of finding the party responsible for the war, but the party that will end the war. Why do we need this funding? It is known fact that the practice of colonialism transferred the rich resources of Asia and Africa to Europe and were used to industrialize their countries. We became poor from this plunder. This unbridled industrialization of the developed economies is also the root cause of climate change, the consequence of which we, the poor countries, are forced to suffer. Our problems are augmented due to the absence of adequate funding. Therefore, those in South are facing a double jeopardy, struggling to develop economically while fighting to protect the living standards of our population. It is therefore imperative that the developed countries deliver on their pledges in Glasgow by doubling their funding. Adding insult to injury, damages caused by extreme weather conditions are increasing, and their impact exceedingly costly. Developing countries who are the worst affected by the rising emission from industrial world need to be compensated for loss and damage. Considering the failure of the developed world in bringing about the much discussed relief, it is proposed that before we get to Dubai for COP28, like-minded nations should meet at ministerial level to discuss the way forward on all aspects of climate financing. This should be followed with the meeting of the heads of government of these countries on the margins of COP28 to display a collective frame of mind to stave off calamity. In conclusion, let me recall the UN Secretary General's recent words that the choice is between collective action or collective suicide. The vacuum created due to inaction now requires the global display of sustained political will by dynamic action and constructive cooperation on the part of like-minded countries to prevent this catastrophe. Let us traverse this path urgently. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, President of South Africa. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Chairperson, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, we are gathered here for COP27 on an African continent that is experiencing the worsening effects of climate change. For the sake of our continent and the world, we need a dramatic increase in global mitigation, an ambition to keep the world on the 1.5-degree pathway. Like other vulnerable regions, Africa needs to build adaptive capacity, foster resilience, and address loss and damage, as we agreed at Paris COP21. Chairperson, in order to achieve this, our continent will need a predictable, appropriate, and at-scale funding stream and technological support. This must support our right to development, international equity and transmissions that are just and inclusive. This then places a great deal of responsibility on developed economies to honor their commitments to those countries with the greatest need and countries that confront the greatest environmental, social, and economic effects of climate change. The commitments that were made must be honored, because failing to honor these commitments breaks trust and confidence in the process. At present, we also have another challenge in relation to funding institutions. Funding institutions need to transform and change the way in which they fund projects that will enable us to develop with regard to climate change. Multilateral development banks, as well as other funding institutions, need to transform. At present, multilateral support is out of reach of the majority of the world's population due to lending policies that are risk-averse and carry onerous costs, as well as conditionalities. We need a clear roadmap to deliver on the Glasgow decision to double adaptation financing by 2025. Our emphasis must be on the health, well-being, and food and water security of the most vulnerable people in the world. At a national level, South Africa is fully committed to achieving the most ambitious end of the mitigation range in our updated nationally determined contribution. As a country, we are guided by a just transition framework and an investment plan that outlines the enormous scale and nature of investments that are needed to achieve our decarbonization goals over the next 5 years. We are already scaling up investment in renewable energy and are on a course to retire a number of aging coal-fired power stations. At COP26 in Glasgow last year, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the United States, and the European Union offered support in the form of a just energy transition partnership to South Africa. It is our hope that this partnership will offer a groundbreaking approach to funding by developed economy countries for the ambitious but necessary mitigation and adaptation goals of a number of developing countries. South Africa is hopeful that the commitments that were made to put effect to this partnership will be met. And we have already said the amounts of money that are needed for South Africa to embark on this difficult journey are close on to $90 trillion. And we have said that the categorization of the funding needs to be well packaged so that there is meaningful grants, meaningful concessional loans, and investments by a variety of institutions. We are grateful and would like to pay our tribute and support for the Egyptian presidency and its confidence in the successful outcomes of COP27. We're grateful to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Evariste Ndayishimiye, President of Burundi. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Excellences, Monsieur le Président de la COP27, Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Mesdames, Messieurs, tout protocole observé. J'aimerais d'abord remercier Dieu le Tout-Puissant qui nous a conduits en bonne santé ici à Sharm el-Sheikh pour prendre part à la 27e conférence des parties COP27. Au nom du gouvernement du Burundi et du peuple burundais et en mon nom propre, j'aimerais remercier le gouvernement, j'aimerais remercier le président de la République arabe d'Égypte, mon frère Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, le gouvernement et le peuple égyptien, plus particulièrement la population de cette belle ville de Sharm el-Sheikh pour l'accueil très chaleureux qui m'a été réservé, ainsi que toute ma délégation. Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, les financements pour la mise en œuvre de la contribution déterminée nationale au Burundi sont largement insuffisants pour financer les changements souhaités. Ils sont morcelés et déployés en silos par une multitude d'agences internationales sans réel effet sur le long terme pour les communautés et la résilience du Burundi face au changement climatique. Ce qui compte aujourd'hui pour le Burundi, c'est de relever le défi de rétablir son niveau de couvert forestier et lutter contre la dégradation permanente de ces forêts, tout en répondant aux besoins de sécurité alimentaire et aux aspirations légitimes de son développement agricole et industriel. Pour cela, il faut produire davantage de nourriture et de bois sur les terres existantes afin de réduire la demande de nouvelles terres qui ne sont tout simplement pas disponibles. Le Burundi souhaite donc stimuler l'investissement des solutions à grande échelle en investissant dans les modèles qui ont été testés et qui sont prêts à être produits pour avoir un véritable impact transformationnel. Ce n'est plus le moment de financer des projets pilotés, des projets pilotes, mais d'accélérer immédiatement le déploiement à grande échelle. C'est le cas de la région, le bassin de Sud de lac Kivu et du lac Tanganyika. Il y a d'énormes dividendes de développement à s'engager dans une production et une transformation des produits de base plus intensifs et absorbants de la main-d'œuvre. Bien entendu, cet objectif est d'autant plus important aujourd'hui compte tenu de l'intérêt croissant pour le lien entre stabilité, sécurité alimentaire, changement climatique et biodiversité, suscité par les événements climatiques extrêmes, la guerre en Ukraine et les besoins croissants des marchés internationaux pour des produits certifiés sans déforestation. Parmi les solutions mises en avant sont les émissions d'obligations souveraines pour financer des portefeuilles de projets remplissant des critères prédéfinis au travers de prêts à long terme à faible taux d'intérêt et de paiement à performance de type paiement sur et pour services environnementaux. Le Burundi lance donc un appel aux agences des Nations Unies et aux institutions financières internationales afin de concevoir ce type de mécanismes financiers innovants tels que des obligations de performance forestière, FPB, adaptées au contexte régional et niveau de risque perçu par les marchés des capitaux. Ces mécanismes doivent combiner les mécanismes de marché des obligations vertes avec des garanties financières de grande envergure et des modèles de paiement basés sur les résultats qui s'inscrivent dans le cadre fixé par UNFCCC. Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, je ne saurais terminer mon propos sans réitérer nos remerciements à tous les organisateurs de la COP27 et du pays hôte, ainsi que tous les partenaires qui ont contribué pour la réussite de cette conférence qui se tient sur le sol africain. Que Dieu vous bénisse. Merci pour votre aimable attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Rumen Georgi Radev, President of Bulgaria. Your Excellency, you have the floor. Okay, sorry, I apologize for that. It's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Asomani Hassali, President of Comoros. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellences, Monsieur Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Président de la République arabe d'Égypte et chers frères, Monsieur le Secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Majesté, Excellence, Altesse, Excellences, Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Mesdames et Messieurs, honorables assistances, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. C'est un réel plaisir pour moi et ma délégation de prendre part à cette importante rencontre que constitue la COP27 dans cette belle, magnifique station balnéaire de Sharm el-Sheikh. Je voudrais tout d'abord relever nos sincères remerciements à mon frère, Son Excellence Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Président de la République arabe d'Égypte, pour l'accueil fraternel et chaleureux ainsi que l'hospitalité qui nous sont réservées à chaque fois que nous foulons le sol de ce grand et beau pays frère. J'adresse également nos remerciements les plus sincères au secrétaire général de la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques pour la bonne organisation logistique de cette conférence. Honorable assistance, Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi en l'entame de mon propos de citer feu le président de la République française, Jacques Chirac, paix à son âme, qui disait « Notre maison brûle et nous regardons ailleurs ». C'était en septembre 2002, à l'occasion du sommet de la Terre à Johannesburg, en République d'Afrique du Sud. 20 ans après, ce cri d'alarme garde toujours toute sa pertinence. En effet, la COP27 de cette année se déroule dans un contexte de crise mondiale notoire qui demande naturellement une détermination et un engagement collectif encore plus fort pour pouvoir y faire face. Les effets entraînés par la crise sanitaire liée à la pandémie de 2019 et la guerre en Ukraine ont fait grimper les prix des denrées de première nécessité, à savoir les denrées alimentaires, l'énergie à des niveaux sans précédent, susceptibles d'entraîner une crise alimentaire internationale. Entre-temps, des phénomènes climatiques et météorologiques alimentent et perturbent généralisés partout dans le monde avec des niveaux records de pluie, de chaleur, de sécheresse, d'incendies et de tempêtes. Le continent asiatique est confronté à des phénomènes climatiques catastrophiques, illustrés par la plus récente catastrophe qui a durement frappé notre pays ami, le Pakistan. Les inondations et les tempêtes en Afrique, au cours du premier semestre 2002, ont entraîné la perte de centaines de personnes et gravement perturbé l'activité économique, et des millions de personnes souffrent de la faim dans le corps de l'Afrique à cause d'une forte sécheresse. L'Europe aussi est également confrontée à la pire sécheresse de ces dernières années, ainsi qu'à des vagues de chaleur torrides, et l'Amérique aussi est confrontée à de violentes néfastes, à de violentes tornades et autres inondations aux conséquences désastreuses. J'adresse ma compassion à tous ces pays frères et amis frappés par ces catastrophes et confrontés aux effets néfastes des changements climatiques. Il est important de souligner qu'au niveau des États insulaires en développement, ces phénomènes climatiques et météorologiques sévères menacent l'existence même de nos pays et freinent leur développement économique ainsi que l'épanouissement de nos populations. Je citerai par exemple le cyclone Kinette qui a frappé toute notre région et dévasté les Comores en avril 2019, causant des pertes humaines, des centaines de blessés, des sinistrés, des masses de dégâts matériels, des dommages que nous sommes toujours en train de réparer depuis plus de 3 ans. Il est ainsi urgent de mener une action collective, mondiale, coordonnée, qui pourrait aider à relever ces plus grands défis auxquels l'humanité fait face. Honorable assistance, nous savons à quel point notre planète souffre du fait du dérèglement climatique. Aussi, cette COP27 doit être l'occasion pour nous de franchir un nouveau palier dans la mise en œuvre effective de l'action climatique internationale et notamment en soutenant toute initiative qui nous permettra de passer enfin de l'ambition à l'action. Lors de la COP26 à Glasgow en 2021, l'une des principales questions était centrée sur la manière dont les pays répondraient aux besoins de financement pour faire face aux impacts du changement climatique qui sont si graves et que les communautés sont tous incapables de s'y adapter. Il a donc été question de créer un mécanisme de financement pour faire face aux pertes et dommages. Dans le cadre de la Convention, nous devons prolonger, voire même consolider la dynamique engagée lors de cette COP. Ainsi, j'ose espérer plus d'engagement et de solidarité afin de parvenir à des avancées beaucoup plus significatives et notamment la création d'un financement supplémentaire dédié à ces pertes et dommages. Mais comme nous le savons tous, nous ne pouvons pas faire face au défi du changement climatique sans les mesures d'adaptation, d'atténuation nécessaires, d'où la nécessité de se concentrer sur l'identification claire et rapide des priorités mondiales dans ce domaine. C'est enfin en renforçant de toute urgence la mise en œuvre des mesures d'atténuation au cours de cette décennie que nous parviendrons à maintenir l'objectif de 1,5 degré. S'agissant plus particulièrement de mon pays, l'Union de Comores, des initiatives ont été prises pour que le pays reste un puits à carbone. C'est dans ce sens que nous avons l'ambition de faire de l'exploitation des immenses potentialités dont dispose le pays, notamment le photovoltaïque, la géothermie, l'hydraulique et l'éolienne, une de nos priorités. Des projets photovoltaïques ont été réalisés et des pourparlers sont d'ailleurs en cours pour un lancement imminent d'un projet de développement de la géothermie. Nous avons également adopté une politique de reboisement de masse intitulée « Un Comorien, un arbre » à travers des campagnes et développer des aires protégées pour couvrir jusqu'à plus de 50% de la superficie nationale tout en reboisant également les bassins versants. Honorable assistance, mesdames et messieurs, avant de clore mon propos, permettez-moi de rappeler que pour que notre combat contre le dérèglement climatique aboutisse, nous devons faire en sorte que l'adaptation devienne une réalité. Les pays développés doivent faire des progrès mesurables dans la fourniture de 100 millions de dollars par an prévus dans l'accord de Paris, sachant qu'actuellement, la somme réelle versée est inférieure à 50%. Dans ce contexte, mon pays souhaite appuyer les revendications légitimes du groupe africain et des pays insulaires en développement en faveur du doublement du financement de l'adaptation d'ici 2025. Nous devons enfin garder à l'esprit que le renforcement des capacités continue d'être un pilier important de la mise en œuvre de l'accord de Paris et je souhaite une très bonne réussite à notre pays frère, les Émirats arabes unis, pour l'organisation de la COP 28, et je vous remercie.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Rumen Georgiev Radev, President of Bulgaria. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Sharm el-Sheikh work program on the global goal on adaptation will allow us to do so. The transition towards a resource-efficient, green and low-carbon economy requires significant interaction between policies, investments, science and public sector. General transformation is only possible with the involvement of the private and financial sectors, and is expected to provide an important opportunity for sustainable development. And finally, given our commitment to advancing the climate agenda in our region and beyond, Bulgaria has already indicated willingness to host COP29. We will reach out our partners to shape a motivated proposal with this regard. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mohamed Menfi, President of Libya. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
السيد الرئيس، أصحاب الفخامة، السيدات والسادة، أتوجه بالتهنئة والشكر إلى فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية على حسن الإعداد وحفاوة اللقاء والوفادة على أرض مصر الآمنة المطمئنة، وهي تستضيف قمة الأمم المتحدة للمناخ كوب 27 في زمن يزداد فيه العالم انزلاقا نحو الفرقة والصراع، في حين يذكرنا الخطر البيئي بأن البشرية تواجه تحديات مشتركة تتطلب نبذ الخلافات والعمل الموحد والجاد لإنقاذ الحياة على كوكب الأرض. السيدات والسادة، إن بلدي ليبيا على رغم مما تمر به من أزمة سياسية تتطلب التركيز جهودنا داخليا والعمل محليا، إلا أننا لا نملك إلا أن نكون جزءا من هذا العالم، وإن المجلس الرئاسي الليبي إذ يطلع بالتزاماته الدولية اتجاه البيئة والمناخ والهجرة والاقتصاد والأمن والسلام، فإنه يرسل رسالة إلى العالم على شكل الدولة التي نطمح إلى بنائها، دولة مدنية منفتحة على العالم تلتزم بالبرامج والمعاهدات الدولية، وعلى رأسها معاهدات وبرامج البيئة والمناخ التي حرص المجلس الرئاسي الليبي على المشاركة فيها على مدى العامين الماضيين. السيدات والسادة، إن إدراكنا وإدراك شعوبنا للتغير المناخي يجب أن يتطور ويزداد عمقا، ويتأكد ارتباطه بشكل مباشر ووثيق بما نواجهه من تحديات حضارية واقتصادية ووجودية، فهو يقوض فرص التنمية والاستثمار ويحد من معدلات النمو الاقتصادي، لا سيما في الدول النامية ذات الطابع الاقتصاد الزراعي والريعي، وذلك لصعوبة تعويض الموارد الطبيعية المفقودة كنتيجة لتأثير التغير المناخي. الحضور الكريم، ربما على خلاف ما يعتقده الكثيرون، فإن ليبيا هي من أكثر الدول حساسية للتغيرات المناخية، حيث بدأ شح مياه الأمطار وتراجع الموارد المائية في السنوات الأخيرة ينذر بموجات جفاف وملوحة التربة وانخفاض خصوبتها بفقدان التربة السطحية وتبخر المسطحات المائية الناتجة عن الأمطار الموسمية بوتيرة غير مسبوقة، كل ذلك بفعل ارتفاعات درجات الحرارة وزحف الرمال والتصحر، فضلا عن انحصار الغطاء النباتي، الأمر الذي يؤثر على النشاط الرعوي وإنتاج الغذاء كما وكيفا، كما أن ليبيا هي من أكثر دول العالم المهددة في ارتفاع منسوب مياه البحر، حيث تملك أكبر ساحل في بلد أفريقيا على حوض البحر المتوسط، والذي يمتد بأكثر من 1770 كيلومتر، ويمثل هذا الشريط الساحلي موطنا لأكثر من 95% من السكان. وعلى الرغم من حالة الانتقال السياسية التي تمر بها البلاد، فإننا لم نقف مكتوبي الأيدي، فقد بدأنا بتفعيل عمل اللجنة الوطنية للتغير المناخي، ورفعنا مستويات الوعي بضرورة الانخراط مع المجتمع الدولي في دفع كافة الجهود الرامية إلى وقف تداعيات التغير المناخي والتخفيف من آثاره السلبية اجتماعيا واقتصاديا وبيئيا. كما شاركنا في أعمال مؤتمر الأطراف 26 في مدينة جلاسكو الاسكتلندية لدفع العملية التفاوضية تجاه تقليل معدل زيادة درجة حرارة الكوكب إلى ما دون 1.5 درجة مئوية. هذا وقد كانت ليبيا من بين الدول التي صادقت على اتفاقية باريس للمناخ المبرمة عام 2015. السيدات والسادة الأكارم، إن طموحنا هو أن تكتسب ليبيا وجها حضاري الذي تستحق وتستعيد دورها الفاعل في محيطها الإقليمي والدولي، ملتزمة بتعهداتها ماضية قدما في تحقيق الأهداف العالمية للتنمية المستدامة التي تضمن الحياة الكريمة للأجيال القادمة وتحافظ على البيئة ومواردها الناضبة. وفقنا الله إلى بلوغ ما نطمح إليه، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Lazaro McCarthy Chakwera, President of Malawi. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, Dr. Sameh Shukri, President of COP27, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this African COP is a test for all of us. It is a test of our mettle as leaders. It is a test of our ability to deliver climate justice for the most vulnerable nations. It is a test of our resolve to mobilize climate financing for mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. It is a test of our capacity to work together as a global community that is sailing into the same storm in the same boat. To pass this test of leadership, we need to go beyond the Berlin budgets of COP1, the Stockholm statements of COP2, the Kyoto protocols of COP3, and the calls and commitments we have all made between COP4 in Buenos Aires and COP26 in Glasgow. To pass this test of leadership, we need to act with courage, urgency, and solidarity. We must act with courage by doing what we said we would do. We must act with the same courage all of you have showed by showing up here in Sharm el-Sheikh. I believe I speak for all of you when I say that the temptation to abstain from COP this year was great, not only because it is discouraging to see how behind we are still on mitigation, adaptation, and financing. It was also tempting for each of you to abstain from this COP because of the great and unprecedented economic hardships your citizens are suffering in your own nation. Hardships all of our nations are suffering. But you resisted this temptation and chose the path of courage. The courage to show up here because you know that it is folly to try to solve a problem on your own, that you can only be solved together. Now you must show that same courage by doing what you already pledged to do in climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and climate financing. I also said we must act with urgency, and the reason for this is simple. We are running out of time. The key to addressing climate change is sustainable development and restoring balance to our relationship with nature. But nature is losing its patience with us and lashing out with unrelenting vengeance. And as nature lashes out, our citizens are also losing their patience. We must act now, not later. We must act today, not tomorrow. And lastly, we must act with solidarity. That means remembering our common humanity in the measures we put in place. If we do not, we will not treat the suffering of other nations as a matter of agency. And to turn a blind eye to that suffering is to do harm to our own humanity. For what is to be human if not to identify with the plight of others simply because you too are human and know what it is to suffer? What is to be human if not to fight for each other so that everyone has a fair chance? A fair chance, the kind of fairness that is about equity and not equality. We are all equal in value before God, but our obligations, our capacities, our opportunities, and our offenses vary. And equity and fairness demand that none of us should set benchmarks for ourselves that we know are so low that they perpetuate a legacy of unfairness against others. In a fair system, the benchmarks for climate mitigation, adaptation, and financing for developed nations like the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Norway, Japan, and Russia cannot be the same as the benchmarks for developing nations like Malawi, Mozambique, and Madagascar, just as the benchmarks for those low-income and low-productivity countries cannot be the same as the benchmarks for a high-income and high-productivity country like China. So as Malawi, we believe that the clear difference in capability and capacity between developed nations must be reflected in the level of responsibility they bear for climate mitigation, adaptation, and financing. And similarly, we believe that the clear difference in capability and capacity between developed nations must be reflected in the resources they access for mitigation, adaptation, and financing. That is fairness. That is justice. That is solidarity. And as we say in Malawi, that is Ubuntu. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Alexander van der Bellen, President of Austria. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear representatives of the civil society, In 2015, at COP21, we adopted the Paris Agreement, a common goal to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Dear colleagues, let us be honest. We are far from reaching the 1.5 goal. In fact, the opposite is happening. Global CO2 emissions rapidly rebounded following the COVID-19 pandemic. And all around the world, we are experiencing the devastating consequences of the climate emergency. Large parts of the global south, of which Egypt is also a representative, are hit particularly hard by the effects of the climate crisis. Rightfully so, the most affected countries demand financial support for climate adaptation, as well as measures to address loss and damages. We, the countries of the global north, are responsible for a large part of global CO2 emissions. Austria, my home country, will assume its responsibility by significantly increasing its budget for international climate finance. In the upcoming years, the period from 2023 to 2026, the Ministry for Climate Action will allocate an additional 220 million euros to international climate finance. For me, as the Austrian president, it was important that my country shows solidarity. We want to do our part to save the world's rainforests from disappearing, to protect our oceans and its incredible marine life, and to support the resilience of our most vulnerable communities. However, we cannot and should not limit ourselves to the question of climate finance. Because one thing is clear, we cannot buy ourselves out of the climate emergency. Money alone won't make our air cleaner. It won't stop Earth from warming up, and it won't prevent the glaciers from melting. Austria aims to become climate neutral by 2040. Many other countries have set themselves similar goals. But these goals must be backed up by concrete measures. Otherwise, they're just blah blah, as Greta Thunberg would say. Indeed, when we look at the UNEP report, it is obvious that there is far too much blah blah and far too little concrete action. I understand Greta's criticism. I understand that young people, and not only young people, are running out of patience. It is up to us to do everything we can to regain trust through concrete action and through commitments, but binding commitments. Austria is expanding renewable energies. We are phasing out the installation of fossil fuel heating systems. We are investing record sums in public transport. These are steps in the right direction, but we need to do much more, much faster. All of us, no matter from which country, political party, or institution we are coming from, must ask ourselves every day, how can we do even better? We must do everything we can to ensure a livable future on this beautiful planet for generations to come. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, President of Ghana. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the government and people of the Arab Republic of Egypt, for their warmth of hospitality to the Ghanaian delegation since our arrival in this ancient historic country, and express our appreciation to the President for hosting this all-important Conference of Parties, COP27, the fifth such on African soil, which has been so well organized. Today, extreme climate occurrences such as severe precipitation and floods, prolonged drought, and heat waves are happening all over the world, both in the developed and developing worlds. Climate change is a global emergency, and Ghana calls on all parties to act with equity and a sense of responsibility. Africa, for her part, must commit herself to resolve the issues of climate change by implementing ambitious measures within her reach. With her vast land, Africa has the greatest potential to help decarbonize the world by absorbing carbon dioxide through regenerative agriculture that requires less fertilizers and reforestation with strong biodiversity content. My government is happy to announce that Ghana is about to launch projects in these areas, which will tackle at the same time climate change at global and domestic levels and social issues by providing people with dignified and sustainable jobs. And I'm also happy to announce that Ghana has launched her Energy Transition Framework and is co-chair of the Forest Climate Leaders Partnership with the United States of America. As chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, I'm also delighted by the announcement made by the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, the respected Kristalina Georgieva, on the operationalization of the IMF's Resilience and Sustainable Trust to help vulnerable countries meet their long-term challenges. As adaptation costs continue to outstrip current international public finance flows, we must, as a matter of urgency, mobilize and scale up adaptation finance inflows to ensure that vulnerable countries are able to meet their adaptation needs. It is critical in this regard that the developed world makes good its long-delayed pledge to mobilize and make available $100 billion annually to the poorer countries to assist in the fight against climate change, and commit, as agreed at COP26 in Glasgow, to doubling resources for adaptation. Furthermore, it is plain to most that a radical restructuring of the global financial architecture, as proposed by the African finance ministers, to accommodate the demands of the developing world is of urgent necessity. It is evident that with these polycrises, that it is not fit for purpose. And I also urge those who hold African debt to commit to debt for climate swap initiatives. I'm telling all partners, take a better look at Africa and see her for what she is, a land of opportunities and growth. I know this may sound unrealistic, taking into consideration the dire situation most of the continent finds itself in today, in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But as far as adaptation to climate change is concerned, nothing can succeed without Africa. With her vast arable land, vibrant youth who aspire only to take their rightful place on the global scene, and a deeply rooted sense of innovation, Africa has a massive role to play. It is Ghana's hope that we will leave this summit with bold and concrete decisions that will help the world tackle its most pressing challenges, help us achieve our climate goals rapidly, and provide the needed development and prosperity for all the peoples of the world. No one will win if Africa loses. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Nikos Anastasiades, President of Cyprus. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as the world's attention is focused on our deliberations here in Sharm el-Sheikh, given the gravity of the decisions to be reached for the future of our planet, I take the opportunity to express my deepest appreciation to the government of the Arab Republic of Egypt for hosting and steering the work of COP27. This is an implementation summit and an African COP concerning on the climate-related changes of this continent. I'm delighted that this COP is hosted by our strategic partner Egypt, and I would like to assure His Excellency the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, of my country's full support in his noble endeavor. Ladies and gentlemen, numerous scientific reports, including the IPCC report, send out the clear and stark message that only the most strategic cuts in carbon emissions would help prevent an environmental disaster from rising temperature. We must rise to these challenges, acting collectively, decisively, and with greater urgency and ambition so as to avoid the worst consequences of a rapidly warming planet. Excellencies, Cyprus is a Mediterranean island state located in a region that has already experienced the impact of climate change. Prolonged periods of droughts and increased temperatures have been threatening our forests and ecosystems, affecting people and livelihoods, which means that demanding an urgent national response. We started the implementation of our national adaptation strategy back in 2017 and are currently in the process of updating this strategy with the aim of advance from the current modalities of incremental adjustment to a planned and systematic approach that can better address the multiple, complex, and interlinked climate change risks and impacts. Notwithstanding the size of our country and our small carbon footprint, we are committed in contributing to carbon emissions reductions. We have collectively, with the European Union framework and with the other member states, submitted a significantly enhanced nationally determined contribution in 2020 with a commitment of reducing net greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to levels in 1990. The EU and its member states remain steadfast in their commitment to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 through a legally binding climate law. Both ambition and implementation are essential in this critical decade to ensure the credibility of us to the Paris Agreement and reach the goal of climate neutrality in a sustainable way. At national level now, we revisited and revised our national policies to make them fit for purpose, to achieve the more ambitious target for 2030 and started the implementation of our long-term strategy towards climate neutrality by 2050. Excellencies, dear friends, distinguished friends, we look forward to the adoption of a comprehensive Sharm el-Sheikh outcome that will ensure an ambitious global response to climate change. Building on the Glasgow Climate Pact, we welcome the establishment of a mitigation work programme that aims at enhancing accountability and encouraging ambition and implementation. We will actively engage with the EU framework in the two-year Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work programme on the global goal on adaptation to enhance adaptive capacity and resilience and reduce vulnerabilities in order to protect people, livelihoods, and ecosystems. Distinguished friends, in recognition of the significant impact of climate change, specifically in our region, necessitating collaborative action for addressing its negative consequences, we launched the Eastern Mediterranean and Middle East Climate Change Initiative in 2018. The initiative led to the development of a regional an action plan consisting of regionally appropriate policies and measures based on the specific findings of our region's top scientists brought together by the initiative to develop solutions to our shared problems that will practically achievable and have ensuring benefits for our citizens. Our action plan was endorsed a while ago at a side event hosted by the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, during which the nations of our region adopted a relevant political declaration which marked the official practical launching and implementation of the said initiative and action plan. Distinguished friends, I would like to end by acknowledging the important role of the youth. Young people's voices have been instrumental in galvanizing action for a more ambitious climate agenda. We are hearing and we are responding to this clear, demanding action so as to be able to look to the future with optimism. Let us respond. Let us all walk the road towards climate neutrality, towards a future of green, sustainable, resilient economies and societies. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Paul Kagame, President of Rwanda. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, heads of state and government, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, President of the 27th Conference of Parties, Minister Sami Shukri, distinguished delegates. First, I express my appreciation to President Sisi and the government and the people of the Arab Republic of Egypt for hosting us in beautiful Sharm el-Sheikh. The findings of the 6th Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change show that a more sustainable future remains within our reach. Yet, despite growing evidence that the damage of global warming will soon become irreversible, there seems to be little sense of urgency. Rwanda, like the rest of Africa, is ready to prioritize renewable energy. We do this for our own future. The point is not to generate carbon credits so that others can continue using coal, even as Africa is discouraged from exploiting its fossil fuel resources. The most valuable contribution that the developed countries can make is to reduce their emissions faster while investing with Africa to build sustainable green power. Questioning whether Africa is ready to make use of climate finance should not be used as an excuse to justify inaction. We have seen the effects of this thinking during the pandemic. Vulnerable nations cannot rely on external financing alone. We need public-private partnerships. This is why Rwanda has launched Ireme Invest, a new green investment facility with over $100 million from US dollars from domestic and international partners. I congratulate all countries that have ratified the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, most recently the United States, and encourage others to do so. Instruments such as the Commonwealth's Blue Charter and Living Lands Charter are also valuable tools, especially for small island and developing states. Rwanda remains committed to inclusive and transparent negotiations for a green and climate resilient future. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Nicolás Maduro Moros, President of Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Buenos días a todas las delegaciones presentes. Hemos viajado 10.407 kilómetros desde Sudamérica, desde Venezuela hasta aquí, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egipto, para traer nuestra verdad y para traer un saludo solidario y comprometido de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela a todos los países del mundo, a todos los pueblos del mundo, en especial al presidente de la República de Egipto, al-Sisi, y al pueblo de Egipto que ha organizado esta fabulosa conferencia mundial contra el cambio climático. He sabido los terribles desequilibrios ambientales que hoy afectan de manera dramática la vida en todo el planeta, que parecen indicar que el cambio climático, así llamado, con incoherente eufemismo, es un hecho irreversible. Temido por muchos y negado por las élites, aquel escenario distópico del que tempranamente alertó la comunidad científica, algunos líderes mundiales y casi la totalidad de los movimientos sociales, se ha convertido en una profecía autocumplida. La mayor crisis ambiental desde que la vida humana existe. La crisis climática es una realidad insoslayable que solo puede enfrentarse con hechos concretos, urgentes e inmediatos. Resulta dolorosa por partida doble tener que admitir además que la dimensión de esta crisis no nos toma por sorpresa. Desde el inicio de la diplomacia ambiental se contaba con los datos suficientes para declarar una emergencia temprana y actuar en consecuencia. De eso hace ya 30 años, con la firma de aquel histórico Acuerdo de Kioto del año 1991, se logró un importante consenso para la reducción de la huella de carbono, que hasta el año 2009 dio buenos resultados. El Acuerdo de París 2015 apuntó a mejorar los mecanismos para obligar a los países llamados desarrollados del capitalismo del norte a reducir su impacto en el calentamiento global, y sobre todo se le da en el Acuerdo de París por fin un carácter vinculante a los aportes de la ciencia en el sentido del cambio climático. Pero también hay que decir, hubo penosos estancamientos y rupturas, como las que se dieron en el año 2009 en la cumbre de Copenhague, donde se puso de manifiesto la poca voluntad de las élites negacionistas para avanzar con el ritmo adecuado a la emergencia y en el sentido correcto de la vida. Todavía recordamos Copenhague, la represión policial en las calles contra los movimientos ecologistas, las confabulaciones burocráticas corporativas que se instalaron desde entonces. Señor presidente, hemos perdido mucho tiempo desde allá hasta acá. Cada hora, cada mes, cada año de inacción, de vacilación, de indolencia, se traduce hoy en ecosistemas destruidos, en especies extintas y en el deterioro de las condiciones de vida del planeta que nos había dado con tanta generosidad, pero que hoy empieza a pasar una enorme factura por los abusos cometidos. Reconocer los fracasos civilizatorios en esta materia es el comienzo para rectificar de manera radical. Ayer nos amenazaba el cambio climático, pero hoy es el colapso absoluto del ecosistema quien se levanta frente a nosotros como un destino fatal. Lo dicen las proyecciones más vigentes. De seguir a este ritmo autodestructivo, en 30 o 40 años será inhabitable este planeta. Esta crisis climática, lo sabemos, tiene y tendrá consecuencias definitivas en el planeta que nos obliga a modificar el modelo de vida consumista. El último informe de la Organización de Naciones Unidas sobre el cambio climático, donde participaron 14.000 científicos del mundo, alertó que si no se reducen las emanaciones de los gases de efecto invernadero, como el dióxido de carbono, el metano, el óxido ferroso al 50%, el daño será irreversible en tan solo 8 años. Es decir, para el 2030 no habrá vuelta atrás en lo que estamos viviendo. Tormentas, huracanes, lluvias, frío y calor extremo que cambian inesperadamente las condiciones de vida y más aún, comprometen nuestra existencia. El calentamiento global está acabando con las especies en la Tierra y esto parece ser imparable. Por mencionar un ejemplo muy conocido, el calor extremo podría estar extinguiendo las abejas. Y si no hay abejas, se interrumpe el proceso y el ciclo natural de la polinización. Si no hay polinización, las plantas no se reproducen y esto disminuiría el oxígeno en el ambiente de la Tierra. La temperatura media anual mundial en los últimos 100 años subió 0.8 grados centígrados. Y se espera que para los próximos 5 años supere el 1.7 grados centígrados. Los gases de efecto invernadero se encuentran en los niveles más altos de la historia de la humanidad. Este nivel, que había caído en el año 2020, producto de la cuarentena de la pandemia, en el año 2021, con la reactivación industrial y comercial, superó el récord del 2019, cuando fueron aproximadamente 12% más altas que en el 2010 y 54% más altas en la emisión que en el 1990. En 32 años hubo un incremento que se debe registrar en siglos. Ha aumentado en consecuencia y de manera desordenada los fenómenos como las sequías, las lluvias extremas. Alrededor del 80% de los desastres naturales entre el año 2001 y 2021 estuvieron relacionados o bien con sequías o bien con inundaciones torrenciales. Según estimaciones de los expertos climáticos, para el año 2050 el océano Ártico quedará prácticamente libre de hielo marino por primera vez en la historia y con un aumento de temperatura de 2 grados centígrados que amenaza con perder el 99% de los corales del mundo. De igual forma, los niveles del mar han subido 23 centímetros desde el año 1880 y casi la mitad de esos centímetros ha aumentado en los últimos 25 años. Cada año el mar sube, de acuerdo a los científicos, 3.4 milímetros. Dicho aumento está causando que el agua dulce se vuelva salada, comprometiendo los recursos hídricos de que dependen millones de personas en el planeta. Ciertamente la civilización humana es responsable de esta grave afectación que hoy vive el planeta. Sin embargo, esta afirmación es incompleta y pecaría de hipócrita si no se detalla que esa civilización es profundamente desigual. Está compuesta por países que llevan 2 siglos explotando indiscriminadamente los recursos naturales del planeta, mientras otros apenas tienen cómo alimentarse y persisten bajo un modo de producción preindustrial. La desigualdad. Venezuela es responsable de menos del 0.4% de las emisiones globales de gases de efecto invernadero en el planeta. No obstante, el pueblo venezolano debe pagar las consecuencias de un desequilibrio causado por las principales economías capitalistas del mundo, quienes han contaminado y continúan contaminando el planeta para el beneficio de unos pocos. La existencia, tal cual como la conocimos, se ha trastocado para siempre en prejuicio de todas las especies vivas del planeta. El ritmo de extinción de las especies que hasta el día de hoy conforman el complejo organismo de la biodiversidad se acelera y extiende alarmantemente, como lo advirtió el comandante Fidel Castro Ruz en aquel célebre discurso en Río de Janeiro hace 30 años en la cumbre de Río. Cito: una importante especie biológica está en riesgo de desaparecer por la rápida y progresiva liquidación de sus condiciones naturales de vida, el hombre. Y agregaba el comandante Fidel Castro, mañana será demasiado tarde para hacer lo que debimos haber hecho hace mucho tiempo, señalando como gran responsable de esta amenaza contra la naturaleza, ya en el año 1992, al capitalismo salvaje y depredador. Será inútil, como ha sido hasta ahora, cualquier esfuerzo que emprendamos para paliar las consecuencias de este desastre ambiental si no tenemos el coraje de reconocer que esa y no otra es la causa del desastre que se avecina. El capitalismo consumista, el capitalismo voraz, depredador y destructor. En el año 2009, en Copenhague, el comandante Hugo Chávez Frías tuvo el coraje de decirlo aquella mañana de manera directa. Permítame recordar esa cita. Cito, decía el comandante Hugo Chávez: ¿cuál es la causa del cambio climático? La causa es el sueño de buscar la felicidad a través de la acumulación material y del progreso sin fin, usando para eso técnicas con las cuales se puede explotar de forma limitada todos los recursos de la tierra. No cambiemos el clima, cambiemos el sistema, sentenciaba en el 2009 el comandante Hugo Chávez en Copenhague. Señor presidente, el desequilibrio y la crisis ambiental creadas en la naturaleza son equiparables a las condiciones de desigualdad e injusticia que el capitalismo ha creado contra la humanidad. Un sistema que normaliza la explotación entre los seres humanos no tiene condiciones éticas para respetar a las otras formas de existencia. El capitalismo ve recursos donde otras culturas ven la vida y lo sagrado. Se siente por eso con derecho de poseer y destruir cuanto se encuentra a su paso para la acumulación del capital. Es necesario en esta cumbre llegar a acuerdos de acción reales y efectivos de cara al problema estructural, pero también debemos diseñar ya mismo una agenda concreta para proteger a las poblaciones vulnerables del planeta. La humanidad no puede seguir huérfana. Es necesario concretar sin demoras, señor presidente, sin demoras ni artificios burocráticos, el Fondo de Financiamiento de Pérdidas y Daños Climáticos, del que venimos hablando hace unos años en cumbres anteriores. Sobre esta propuesta impostergable debemos trabajar hasta el último detalle, afinando los mecanismos para que el auxilio financiero sea de forma directa, justa, oportuna y expedita, de manera que llegue a los pueblos más afectados la indemnización por los daños ambientales. Cualquier acuerdo que se tome hoy debe atacar de raíz el problema y atender prioritariamente a los más vulnerables del planeta. La desigualdad abismal entre los países del llamado primer mundo frente al resto se ha incrementado y profundizado en las últimas décadas al mismo paso de la destrucción ambiental. Hay una correlación entre la crisis ambiental y la crisis de desigualdad que genera pobreza en el mundo. La explotación indiscriminada de los recursos renovables y no renovables, además de producir miseria ambiental, es responsable de la miseria social a escala planetaria que también se agudiza. Esto no puede ser obviado al momento de trazar medidas drásticas y planes efectivos que corrijan y normen la actividad civilizatoria para el devenir. Finalmente, señor presidente, abogamos como país soberano por la protección de la Amazonía. Venimos de un encuentro con el presidente de Colombia, Gustavo Petro, con el presidente de Surinam, con los movimientos sociales suramericanos, para asumir responsabilidades como habitantes de Suramérica en la salvación de la selva y la biodiversidad del Amazonas. Milenios de existencia han dejado una huella irreparable en el Amazonas. Por el contrario, creemos que son los pueblos originarios quienes deben enseñarnos cómo salvar y cómo convivir con la naturaleza. Las culturas ancestrales y originarias de todo un continente, de los indios originarios Sioux del norte de América hasta los Yanomamis de la selva amazónica han concebido siempre a la tierra y a la selva como un ser vivo que siente y piensa como nosotros. Despertemos a esa verdad y salgamos de la arrogancia antropocéntrica que nos impide ver lo sagrado que es el mundo. Los venezolanos y las venezolanas no nos caracterizamos por ser pesimistas. Nos asiste un infatigable espíritu de lucha, de resistencia y un inmenso amor por la vida que nos eleva a pensar en una nueva humanidad desde una nueva espiritualidad. Una humanidad reconciliada con la naturaleza, reconciliada consigo misma, reconciliada con el futuro. Ya no hay, como decía el filósofo canadiense Marshall McLuhan, ya no hay pasajeros en esta nave espacial llamada Tierra. Todos somos tripulantes. Sé que no hay un hombre ni una mujer de a pie que esté dispuesto a ver eclipsar esta hermosa aventura que puede ser la humanidad nueva, la humanidad salvada. Tampoco nosotros nos quedaremos sentados a ver el final de los días. Cuente el mundo con nuestro pueblo comprometido y trabajador, lleno de esperanza, dispuestos a unir todos los esfuerzos con nuestros hermanos de una nueva humanidad. La ilusión del desarrollo infinito por la vía consumista ha terminado. Pongámosles límite ahora al daño causado a la madre naturaleza. Presidente, hermanos y hermanas, se agotó el tiempo de los discursos y también el de los lamentos. Solo queda un presente para actuar radical y certeramente en favor de otro mundo posible, de una vida verdadera. Y aunque el presente sea un instante ante los ojos de la eternidad, será suficiente si hay voluntad de vida. Y hay voluntad de vida. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency, Mr. José María Neves, President of Cabo Verde. Your Excellency, you have the floor. Président, chef d'État et de gouvernement, Mesdames et Messieurs, le changement climatique et leurs conséquences constituent l'une des plus grandes menaces actuelles de l'humanité et notre capacité à les combattre et à les atténuer dépend fortement de la solidarité entre les pays et de la combinaison des efforts déployés dans la recherche de solutions pratiques et efficaces à l'échelle mondiale. Cabo Verde est l'un des pays les plus vulnérables de l'Afrique et du monde, un petit État insulaire en développement avec l'une des plus faibles émissions de gaz à effet de serre par habitant au monde. Cabo Verde contribue peu ou pas du tout au renforcement climatique, mais en raison de ses vulnérabilités, c'est un pays qui a beaucoup souffert des conséquences de ces phénomènes, qui a mis en péril des années de progrès réalisés vers le développement durable du pays,
Malheureusement, la sécheresse qui afflige l'archipel sont de plus en plus fréquentes et longues, et nous assistons également à une aggravation de l'intrusion saline et à la détérioration des eaux souterraines, à la dégradation des sols et à la perte de la biodiversité, entre autres. La pandémie de Covid-19 et la crise énergétique associée au changement climatique ont considérablement aggravé les contraintes et les vulnérabilités structurelles du pays. L'aggravation de la dette publique et la détérioration des indicateurs sociaux constituent d'énormes défis pour atteindre les buts préconisés dans les plans nationaux et fixés par les objectifs de développement durable de l'agenda 2030 des Nations Unies. Les pays ont participé activement à la gouvernance régionale et internationale du climat et a signé des conventions et des accords internationaux clés, notamment la Convention cadre des Nations Unies pour le changement climatique, le protocole de Kyoto et l'accord de Paris. Au niveau national, Cabo Verde a adopté la lutte contre le changement climatique et l'atténuation de ses effets en tant que politique de l'État. Les mesures de lutte contre le changement climatique sont incluses dans les principaux programmes et plans de développement stratégique du pays. Les plans stratégiques pour le développement durable, le programme de développement stratégique Cabo Verde Ambition 2030, le plan national d'adaptation et la contribution déterminée au niveau national. Cabo Verde n'a épargné aucun effort pour minimiser les impacts des changements climatiques par des actions planifiées et concrètes. Parmi celles-ci, nous soulignons la mesure visant à réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre jusqu'à 35% d'ici 2030, ce qui implique une plus grande pénétration des énergies renouvelables et une circulation à faible émission de carbone grâce à l'introduction des dispositifs d'incitation aux véhicules électriques, en particulier dans le secteur des transports publics. Pour une gouvernance climatique efficace, les pays comptent sur le soutien des principaux partenaires au développement et espèrent pouvoir accéder plus facilement aux fonds mis en place à cet effet. Pour les petits États insulaires en développement, tels que Cap-Vert, il est vital qu'ils puissent accéder aux financements mondiaux. Pour la mise en œuvre de la contribution déterminée au niveau national, par exemple, le Cap-Vert doit mobiliser environ 2 milliards d'euros au cours de 10 prochaines années. Dans ce contexte, j'appelle la communauté internationale à considérer la possibilité de transformer la dette des petits États insulaires en développement en investissement climatique dans l'éducation, la santé et dans la lutte contre la pauvreté et les inégalités. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency
Mr. George Mani Wee, President of Liberia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, heads of state and government, Her Excellency Madam Claire Marie, First Lady of the Republic of Liberia, Your Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, the President of the 27th United Nations Climate Change Conference, heads of international organizations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor to extend my profound thanks and appreciation to the government and people of the Arab Republic of Egypt for hosting the UN Climate Change Conference, COP27 in Egypt. When we attended COP26 1 year ago in Glasgow, Scotland, our world was just beginning to emerge from the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And there was a sense of recovery and a renewal of hope that we could once again act together in concert to refocus our collective efforts on mitigating the devastating effects of global climate change. We acknowledge our shortcomings in terms of inequity and admitted our shortfalls in meeting our target for reducing our carbon emissions and footprints. We also reconfirm our commitment to contribute higher levels of financing to support our efforts and review and re-evaluate our chances of limiting the rise in global warming to meet our temperature targets of 1.5 degrees centigrade by 2030. Now, 1 year later, as we meet in Sharm el-Sheikh today, we are observing, waiting and hopeful that our promises made in Glasgow will be kept and pledges fulfilled. We are also saddened to note that inequity and imbalance still remain between high and low emitters in the climate change architecture, and that the financial flows within still remains disproportionate and unfair to low-emitting countries, especially those with significant carbon capture capability, who are expected to reserve their forests without commensurate benefits to their populations. So, as we assemble here once again to find a pragmatic and productive way forward, let us do so with renewed dedication, commitment, and sincerity, so that we harness our collective strength to develop lasting solutions that will save our world, not only for ourselves, but for generations yet unborn. Let us stand by the decisions and commitment we make at this COP27 conference here in Egypt to avert a global catastrophe. Ladies and gentlemen, together we can implement and make our one world a better place. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Sandrika Bersat Santoki, President of Suriname. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, distinguished chair, members of the head table, leaders of the world, ladies and gentlemen. 1 year passed since COP26. Today, we are all more aware that concrete actions are needed now. Instead of more pledges, talks, and promises for the future. We are living the horrors of climate change, and yet we see no significant actions to live up to the Paris Agreement. Mr. Chair, I'm standing here as president of a small nation, but also as a representative of a very small group of countries, a group of only 3 countries in the world that are still carbon negative. My country, Suriname, is also part of a larger grouping of 11 high forest and low deforestation countries and part of the Amazon forest. Our nation is also part of the grouping of 51 small island developing and low-lying coastal states. Suriname's contribution to global emission is 0.01%, and we are net carbon sink. We are, in fact, carbon negative. Mr. Chair, despite this, we are highly vulnerable to climate impacts. My country has a low-lying vulnerable coast that is threatened due to the sea level rise, and has taken bold decisions to prepare itself. We have created a strong institutional and policy framework with a national climate change policy, strategy and action plan, a national adaptation plan, and sectoral policies that give high priority to climate objectives. With assistance from the IDB, we have transformed our NDC into investment plan with an estimated $700 million in climate change investments. Mr. Chair, Suriname is ready for a full implementation of its NDCs to deliver the results we promise and to protect ourselves from the ravages of sea level rise. Suriname has committed to protect our mangrove forests from our limited state budget. Next year, Mr. Chair, we'll sign our first national climate agreement that will show our strong commitment to maintain our forests, to prioritize clean energy, and to promote the integration of climate mitigation and adaptations actions. We are building our national technical capacity and expertise with support of international organizations to be effective in preparation, design, and implementation. Mr. Chair, our energy supply is already for 50% renewable, and we are adding more. Mr. Chair, in the wider Caribbean, many of us almost daily have to address climate change occurrences through external borrowing because we lack the resources. That's why we need support now to include loss and damage as a third pillar in the climate financing structure. Once these funds become available, we also need to simplify the procedures for access to climate finance and to make appreciable condition period more efficient and effective. We cannot wait years to receive climate finance. Let us make it simple, accessible, and make it work. Mr. Chair, let us not create another international bureaucracy. The Bretton Woods Institutes should incorporate climate change in their economic recovery programs in a more effective way. Climate change has become part of the economic paradigm. We call upon the international community to put its money where its mouth is. Mr. Chair, the international community has promised billions, but thus far too little has materialized. Ladies and gentlemen, promises made must be kept. Therefore, on behalf of our children and the next generation, we urgently call on the historic emitters to do more and to help to save our world. My country is doing its part in this regard with the limited resources and capacity. Mr. Chair, I thank you. May God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Antonio Costa, Prime Minister of Portugal. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Senhor Presidente, Excelências, minhas senhoras e meus senhores, começo por agradecer ao Presidente Sisi, ao Governo do Egito e ao povo egípcio a forma calorosa e a bem organizada como nos acolheram nesta COP27. A ciência é clara. A emergência climática é já uma crise que nos afeta hoje e o drama da guerra da Ucrânia não nos pode desviar da urgência da resposta ao desafio das alterações climáticas. Na verdade, as consequências desta guerra só nos têm demonstrado quão necessário é acelerar a transição energética e diminuir a dependência dos combustíveis fósseis. Todos somos afetados pela dramática escalada dos preços da energia decorrente desta guerra, deixando milhões de seres humanos em situação de pobreza energética. Portugal, que há mais de 15 anos iniciou a aposta nas energias renováveis, é um exemplo de como investir cedo nesta transição nos garante que somos menos dependentes e estamos mais seguros do ponto de vista energético. Não podemos recuar nos nossos compromissos. Importa sairmos de Sharm el-Sheikh com uma visão clara, que nos permita obter resultados concretos nas diversas questões com que estamos confrontados, da mitigação ao financiamento, passando pela adaptação e revisão das contribuições nacionais. Este esforço tem de ser liderado pelos países mais desenvolvidos e pelos países que são grandes emissores. Excelências, Portugal não perde de vista os seus próprios compromissos. As nossas metas são ambiciosas, mas temos conseguido cumpri-las e até antecipá-las. Acreditamos que a transição energética justa pode ser sinónimo de crescimento e prosperidade económica. Mas é, acima de tudo, um imperativo moral. Como líderes, devemos esta transição às nossas populações, ao resto do mundo e às gerações futuras. Com a entrada em vigor no ano passado da primeira Lei de Bases do Clima em Portugal, reforçamos o nosso objetivo de atingir a neutralidade carbónica até 2050, com o compromisso de estudar e preparar-nos para a sua antecipação até 2045. Desde Glasgow, conseguimos antecipar já em 2 anos o encerramento das nossas centrais a carvão, que já deixaram de funcionar no ano passado e que, apesar da crise energética, não vamos reativar. Continuamos também a apostar nas energias renováveis e temos capacidade e ambição de passar de importadores de energia fóssil a exportadores de energia verde. Hoje, as energias renováveis representam já cerca de 60% da eletricidade consumida e o nosso objetivo é crescer para 80% até 2026. Estamos também convictos que o hidrogênio verde e outros gases renováveis são as energias para o futuro. Alcançámos há poucos dias um acordo com a França e com a Espanha para a criação de um corredor de energia verde para servir o centro e o norte da Europa. Uma palavra muito dolorosa, devo dizer, sobre os incêndios florestais. É uma realidade nem sempre abordada neste fórum, mas da maior importância para a redução de emissões e para a capacidade da floresta desempenhar o seu papel no sequestro do carbono. A verdade é que se estima que 6% das emissões mundiais de CO2 resultem de incêndios de causa humana. Em anos mais extremos, pode mesmo chegar a representar 20% das emissões mundiais de CO2. Melhorias significativas nas políticas e nos processos de prevenção e extinção de incêndios são, assim, um importante contributo para a redução de emissões e para a defesa das florestas. É nesse quadro que no próximo ano organizaremos em Portugal a 8ª International Wildland Fire Conference, onde se pretende construir um referencial do risco de incêndio e um modelo de governança do mesmo. Convidamos todos os países a juntarem-se a nós e a participarem nesta conferência. A proteção das florestas é um desafio global, como sumidouro de CO2, como protetora de solos e dos lençóis de água. Foi com enorme entusiasmo que ouvimos o novo presidente eleito do Brasil, Lula da Silva, a renovar o compromisso de desflorestação zero na Amazónia. Excelências, não podemos, obviamente, esquecer também as nossas responsabilidades no esforço global de financiamento. Esta conferência, realizada no continente africano, tem de conseguir também dar respostas aos problemas deste continente. Portugal tem vindo a intensificar a cooperação para a ação climática. Em setembro passado, assinámos com o Banco Africano de Desenvolvimento um acordo de garantias no montante de 400 milhões de euros para apoiar o investimento em 6 países africanos: Angola, Cabo Verde, Guiné-Bissau, Guiné Equatorial, Moçambique e São Tomé e Príncipe, em setores prioritários, tais como as energias renováveis. E pretendemos fazer mais. No quadro da Estratégia da Cooperação Portuguesa 2030, teremos um pilar dedicado ao planeta e iremos reforçar em 25% o apoio aos nossos parceiros da cooperação neste domínio para ajudar a combater as alterações climáticas também no continente africano. Excelências, a gestão sustentável dos oceanos é também central para a nossa resiliência às alterações climáticas. Os oceanos são mesmo o grande regulador climático. E importa neste domínio que prossigamos políticas baseadas na ciência. Foi nesse espírito que co-organizámos com o Quênia a 2ª Conferência dos Oceanos das Nações Unidas e destaco nesse âmbito o Fórum de Investimento em Economia Azul Sustentável, no qual foram assumidos compromissos concretos de investimento no valor de 10 mil milhões de euros. Dado o sucesso desta iniciativa, iremos realizar no próximo ano, em 2023, a segunda edição deste Fórum. Excelências, Sr. Presidente, permita-me concluir. O diálogo multilateral é fundamental para atingir os objetivos de Paris e encontrar as respostas para fazer face aos desafios globais. Juntos, podemos caminhar rumo a sociedades neutras em carbono, sociedades resilientes aos impactos das alterações climáticas, sociedades que gerem de forma eficiente, circular e sustentável os seus recursos, sociedades movidas por energias renováveis e apoiadas num princípio de transição justa. É esta a sociedade que Portugal deseja construir e ajudar a construir. É este o caminho da paz, da prosperidade e do desenvolvimento sustentável. Muito obrigado pela vossa atenção.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Irakli Garibashvili, Prime Minister of Georgia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, dear friends, I'm honored to address you on behalf of my country, Georgia. And I want to thank the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt for his leadership as our host and for the tireless efforts in the preparation of this very important event. Dear colleagues, climate change has become a challenge for our generation. And we as leaders of our countries are responsible to find a solution for the sake of humanity and our future generations. There is no time for deliberation. We need swift and result-oriented actions. In this spirit, Georgia is considering turning the Paris commitments into credible delivery and increasing the ambition of its nationally determined contributions in 2025. We have developed a very comprehensive Georgia's 2030 climate change strategy and subsequent action plan to further facilitate the ambitious agenda for climate change mitigation. Additionally, Georgia, with its long-term low-emission development strategy, targets to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 with unifying national efforts and with international support. Georgia has one of the cleanest grids. 85% of our electricity comes from renewable sources. And further enhancing the share of renewables energy is a strategic priority for my country. Additionally, we continue to support further non-traditional renewable energy development projects, such as solar, wind, hydrogen, geothermal, and other means of sustainable sources. I'm confident that a robust framework for increasing the resilience of our countries will be an important outcome of our negotiations in Sharm el-Sheikh. However, these efforts can only be effective if the perspectives and contexts of developing countries in all regions are considered. Equitable geographical representation, sovereign equality, and dignity of all its member states is a fundamental principle of the UN's work and of this body. The principle to leave no one behind is echoed in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Therefore, achieving equitable geographic representation in the composition of constituted bodies under the Convention remains among our highest priorities at this COP. In conclusion, dear friends, I encourage and remind all of our colleagues that success cannot be achieved alone. Only with joint efforts we will be able to reap the rewards. So let's work together and translate the outcomes of COP27 into prompt climate action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Surangel Samuel Whips, President of Palau. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, thank you for hosting the summit. Palau hopes that the coming together of this 27th Conference of the Parties, we commit to true change. We have a saying in Palau. It goes, "Ugulu lao ramatamalang," which refers to spending too much time talking about the impending disaster and only acting when it's too late. The time is now to act. From the extreme droughts in parts of the US, Europe, and China, and the floods in Pakistan and Australia, to destructive storms in the Philippines and Florida, lives, crops, and homes have been destroyed. There is no doubt that we are facing the impacts of climate change. When we last met, I said, on Palau's experiences, you might as well bomb us. That might have been an easier fate. In Palau, we are being drawn and quartered. COVID decimated our economy. Even as we are working to rebuild, the climate crisis is tearing us apart, limb by limb. Extreme storms and floods continue to destroy our crops and homes and infrastructure. Just last Monday, we were hit by another storm, ripping off roofs and damaging infrastructure. Sea levels are rising, eating away at our coastlines and inundating our taro patches and farms and impacting food security. Droughts have caused water shortages. The extreme heat this summer killed over 30 million of our prized and beautiful jellyfish that are now world-renowned because they're stingless. This is the third known event for Palau. It occurred in 1997, again in 2017, and now in 2022. They usually disappear each time for a period of 2 years. As one of our star attractions, we are at risk of losing a critical component of our tourism industry, further decimating our economy, which we are trying to rebuild after COVID. This reality underscores our urgent call today for all states to do what is needed to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. We should no longer be held hostage to fossil fuels. Let's not let the war in Ukraine serve as an excuse for us to backslide on our commitments to transitioning to renewable energy. Today, we are calling for those who are the largest emitters of pollution to take responsibility for the damage they cause. Loss and damage to be fully operationalized, and easier and faster access to climate financing and adaptation and mitigation in the form of grants and not loans. We urge the developed nations to deliver on the $100 billion climate finance commitment and to at least double their collective provision for climate finance adaptation by 2025. There's a legend in Palau which offers some sense of hope. It's about two men who lived in adjoining caves in the village of Oigul in Irai. Mr. Baribra, who was good at making coconut syrup, and Mr. Amaredong, who who was good at catching fish. Because they thought they were alone, they threw away their surpluses and created lots of waste. When they realized they weren't alone, they shared their excess and lived abundant lives. With everyone working together, we can address climate change. This must include the 23 million Taiwanese excluded from participating in UN conventions. Taiwan, like all of us, has contributed to the problem. However, they are committed to being part of the solution. They actively support other countries' climate aspirations while moving toward net zero emissions by 2050. We share one ocean, one atmosphere. We must share in the responsibility to find innovative solutions and commit to change our behaviors. I am not giving up. I know keeping below 1.5 seems unachievable. However, together, nothing is impossible. This week, here at COP, let us act to stop the torture, to save the world, and to provide hope for our children and theirs. Thank you, Rokman Masulang.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. Distinguished heads of the state and government, delegates, honored guests, we will continue with the delivery of national statement today in 30 minutes in this plenary. With this, I declare this joint meeting in the COP, CMP, and CMA adjourned.